two very powerful men on Capitol Hill to talk about it. Congressman Michael Burgess, a Republican representing the 26th District in Texas, a member of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. Thank you for being here.
Yes, sir. Good to be with you.
And California Congressman Henry Waxman, a Democrat whose district includes Los Angeles, former chair of the House Government Reform and the Energy and Commerce Committees. Congressman, welcome to you.
Thank you. Pleased to be with you.
So, Congressman Waxman, here we have a battle over budget, which is also a battle over greenhouse gas regulations. Republicans are saying the Democrats are trying to accomplish by regulation what they weren't able to get through legislation.
Well, this isn't just a money problem. They want to cut EPA by 30%, and that's going to keep EPA from doing all the things that they should be doing to protect the environment. It's not a lot of money in the scheme of things. It's really an ideological assault on the Environmental Protection Agency and its protection of the environment. As far as greenhouse gas regulation goes, the EPA proposed a very modest regulation to say that when there are new plants built that are huge emitters of carbon emissions, that they have to reduce their emissions through efficiency. And I think it makes sense. They will save money. They'll be more competitive when they do it, and it's very, very narrowly tailored. I think we've got to do a lot more than that to lower the carbon emissions. The Republicans have become the science deniers. They refuse to accept the science that there is such a thing as global warming and it's caused by people, and that we have to do something about it. We finally convinced the committee to hold a hearing with reputable scientists, and the scientists are telling us very frightening things about the temperature of the planet going up, the impact on the North Pole, and the climate change that we're seeing. It can't be denied. We're seeing it all around the world. We're seeing it in the United States, droughts and floods and all sorts of natural disasters that are unusual, and they do have consequences. We need to do some action, I think, more than what the EPA is proposing.
All right.
But the Republicans are trying to stop that from even happening.
Let me go to your Republican colleague, Congressman Burgess. And Congressman Burgess, to flip that argument, the Democrats are saying that Republicans in Congress are using the budget not to cut the budget, but as an instrument of making policy.
Well, look, first off, I'm from Texas. If it wasn't for unusual weather, we wouldn't have any weather at all. So we kind of grew up with unusual weather, and it's a way of life for us. Here's the deal: on the EPA regulating carbon under the Clean Air Act, carbon was never one of the criteria pollutants that was open for regulation under the Clean Air Act. This is the EPA wading into territory where it's never gone before, and let us not forget, this is an EPA overseen by an administration. The president said during his campaign that energy prices would necessarily skyrocket if you use coal, natural gas, or oil to generate your power.
But let me ask you on a point about that, Congressman Burgess. It was under the Bush administration that the Supreme Court found that greenhouse gases are air pollutants and the EPA can regulate them.
Well, I don't know that that's exactly correct. The Supreme Court said that the EPA could regulate them, but not that it had to regulate them. And that is, in fact, what Chairman Upton's legislation tomorrow is. The markup of that legislation tomorrow, that's exactly what it's to get at.
But the EPA is an executive office?
Well, look, the EPA is an unelected, appointed body. We're the elected representatives. We're the ones that are accountable to the American people. If the members of Congress make a decision that the American people reject, then we're going to hear about it at the ballot box. But if Lisa Jackson does, there's nothing the average voter can do to affect the direction and the substance of what comes out of the EPA. Where that belongs is in the United States Congress, and this administration, more so than any other, has taken legislative activity and moved it to the regulatory side. It's not just the EPA, it's healthcare, it's financial regulation. It's up and down the pipe that they've done this. So it's appropriate for us to mark this bill up tomorrow. It's appropriate to – Chairman Waxman is right. It was appropriate for us to have the discussion yesterday. I will tell you that the more I look into this, the public health implications of carbon regulation are much more severe. Look, poverty is a much more severe public health problem than is carbon. It's just as simple as that. You have many, many more people dying of malnutrition globally than you do from global climate change.
Congressman, apropos of the economic argument, Congressman Burgess, we heard that 30 years ago in Los Angeles with air quality regulation, and the air quality standards were imposed. The air quality is improved, and until the recession that hit everybody, the economy's been doing pretty well, too. So how does it affect jobs?
This is not air quality. The criteria pollutants regulated under the Clean Air Act are unaffected by the legislation being marked up tomorrow. What is affected is the overreach of the EPA saying, now we're going to regulate carbon along with sulfur dioxide and nitrous dioxide and the other criteria pollutants that were included in the legislation that Mr. Waxman worked on before the Earth cooled the first time, known as the Clean Air Act.
And Congressman Waxman, what about that argument that the EPA has overreached itself here?
The Clean Air Act was adopted on a bipartisan basis. As you even pointed out, the EPA was established under President Nixon's administration. The U.S. Supreme Court found on a 5-4 basis that the EPA must regulate carbon emissions.
That's where you and Congressman Burgess disagree on the wording there.
Well, I don't know.
They could regulate emissions.
No, let me finish. They must regulate if they made a finding that the carbon emissions endangers the public health and the environment. The head of the EPA under President George W. Bush realized that he had to make that finding, and he communicated that. We made that public, his letter to the administration making that finding. Once that finding is made, there has to be some regulation.
All right, we'll be back with our members of Congress in a moment. Michael Burgess of Texas, Henry Waxman of California, and your calls, 866-893-KPCC. Back in a moment. I'm Pat Morrison. As Congress looks at budget cutting, it is looking at the budget of the Environmental Protection Agency, as well as some of the powers exercised by that agency. And so the debate is about the political undertones of this budget debate and what's going to happen as this bill makes its way through Congress. We still have for a couple of minutes our two members of Congress. Congressman Waxman, you were talking about earlier about the powers, the authority of the EPA and what this legislation might do.
Well, the Republicans reject the idea that Supreme Court on a 5-4 basis can establish what the law is. And, of course, we had to swallow a lot of 5-4 decisions, including the Supreme Court naming the president and allowing corporations to make unlimited contributions, corporate dollars with no disclosure. But they did rule 5-4 in a way that I thought made sense. They said if the EPA decides, based on the science, that carbon is a danger to public health and the environment, they have to, after they make that endangerment finding, regulate. So the proposal we have before us that we're going to vote on tomorrow that the Republicans are putting forward is to change the science. They said, no, this isn't. We are now making a declaration that the EPA's scientific finding was incorrect, and EPA no longer has the ability to regulate. I think it's extraordinary that the Congress of the United States should vote by a majority on what the science is. And what is really going on is that the Republicans have become science deniers. It would be as if my doctor said to me, you have cancer, God forbid, and I looked around for 100 doctors to find one that would say, don't worry about it. That would be ludicrous, but that's what we had at our hearing. The Republicans had the same guy at 17 different hearings. He's one of the few people that they could ever find anywhere in the world to deny the evidence of pollution problems. And then if I said to the doctor, well, I feel fine, what's going to happen? He said, well, I don't know. You have to undergo therapy. I would then say, well, it all must be a hoax. I'm going to reject his scientific finding. This is where we find the Republicans today. They're denying the science. Most of the Republicans on our committee got contributions from the Koch brothers, who have a lot of oil and gas interests. They had to sign a pledge that they would try they would overturn the EPA's ability to regulate the Koch brothers.
Congressman,
and they're funding. They're very extreme, and they're in charge of the Republican Party right now, as it seems to me.
Let me get a response from Congressman. Let me get a response from Congressman Burgess to my question. Congressman Burgess, if you just hold on, I do want to ask about whether or not the challenge to global climate change is what this is all about. Do you and your colleagues believe there is global climate change, that it's man-made? And then please speak to the second part of Congressman Waxman's comment.
Well, first, I must say, the decision was political, not scientific. It was political, made by Lisa Jackson. It was baked in the cake when she was named administrator. Is the climate changing? Answer, yes. Is man responsible for that? Answer, no one knows. And it is just the height of chutzpah for us to be claiming that man-made effects can change something as profound as the climate on this planet. The climate has changed over eons. Man has had nothing to do with it. There is nothing compelling in any of the statements made by the scientists that Mr. Waxman assembled yesterday that will cause me to believe otherwise. I did ask one of his lead scientists out of University of California, San Diego, why is it that you haven't been able to close the deal with the American people? No one believes you, other than the Democrats on our committee. And he admitted that they had, in fact, failed in that. The reason
that may be a PR issue rather than a science issue. Congressman?
Yes.
I said that may be a PR issue because scientists aren't very good at making their cases necessarily, rather than a science issue. But what about the congressman's second point regarding campaign contributions from oil and gas interests?
You heard my comment. If he wants to tell a story, begin it with Once Upon a Time. The Chairman Waxman has no knowledge of that. As far as I know, I have not taken campaign contributions for the Koch brothers, but even if I had, it doesn't mean that I signed a pledge to them that I was going to change the makeup of the EPA. Look, you pointed out at the beginning of this broadcast that Richard Nixon created the EPA. He also started HMOs, and guess what? He didn't get to finish his presidency.
Is that why?
No, you know why. But just because Richard Nixon started it doesn't mean it is inherently a good organization.
Congressman Burgess, what happens next?
This has become nakedly political, in my opinion, and we've seen evidence of it time and time again in our hearings that we've had, both when Mr. Waxman was chairman and now that Mr. Upton is chairman. It is...
Congressman Burgess, what happens next in Congress with this legislation, with the budget?
What happens next is that we have a markup tomorrow on this legislation. We'll see how the vote goes. It's very likely to go Chairman Upton's way. He will then bring it to the full committee. We'll have further markup and debate, and it will come to the floor at some point. It will be debated and voted on the floor, and then it will go to the Senate. What happens next really is up to can the public opinion sway enough senators to actually look at this? They had an opportunity last year with Lisa Murkowski, and they decided against it. But once again, the popular pressure on the Senate is what's going to be required for them to actually take up this legislation and pass it after it passes the House.
All right, gentlemen, thank you for a spirited conversation. We hope we can have you back for more of it after we find out where this is going in the Congress with the budget and other matters. Congressman Michael Burgess, a Republican representing the 26th District in Texas, and Henry Waxman, a Democrat representing the 30th District of California, parts of Los Angeles, both of them having spending time on the House Energy and Commerce Committee.